So I'm Laura Danziger. I'm one of the faculty in Cincinnati, and today we have the opportunity to hear from a panel of experts who actually make the VTEUs run. And so I'm going to have them each introduce themselves, and then they're going to answer some kind of general questions. And if you have questions for them, you can put them in the chat, or you can just bring them up. And we'll have a discussion. So Michelle, do you want to start?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this roundtable today. I am the director of the clinical research program in the Division of Infectious Diseases at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. And I have many hats in that role, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. Kirsten.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Kirsten Hauge, and I am the manager of program operations at the University of Washington Virology Research Clinic. We're also one of the VTEUs here in Seattle. I've been in this role, this particular role since 2018, but I've actually worked with the clinic and on Ewald since 2003. So I've been here a long time.
Amy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I am the Senior Trials Regulatory Specialist with Emory Children's Center in Atlanta, Georgia. I have been in this role for about 3 years now. My background was in psychology, mostly an emphasis on neurochemistry, but very quickly moved into working for a Japanese pharmaceutical company out of a graduate program. And from there, I've worked on a variety of therapeutic areas in a variety of capacities, and was surprised when I looked, because I don't feel this old, but it's been over about 20 years now that I've been in the industry. I've been with Emory University now for about 3 years, and it's my first step into academics, and I'm loving it. And I just love that I'm this close to the research, that the emphasis of what we do is on research, and that I work for such an amazing facility. So I'm thrilled to be here. So thanks so much for having me.
And Theda. Theda, tell me how you say your name.
It's Theda, but
Theda, okay.
Yeah, I'm used to so many pronunciations, but hi, everyone. I think you can see me better. My name is Theda Gibson. I'm the lab manager over here at the Emory Children's Center with our VTEU. I actually have been the lab manager for the past 5 years. I've been here a long time. So I started off as a technician when our site first got selected as a VTEU. So I literally saw us grow from, it literally was just me in the lab and my boss who would help me out sometimes. You know, we started off just processing, just mainly flu trials. So it's pretty simple, but you know, I pretty much grew into this position because, like I said, we started off really small. So I went from, you know, just the regular technician to lead technician to now the lab manager.
Great. So they asked us to talk a little bit about our role and our daily task that we do. So I will confess to be the oldest here, I guess, and say that I've been working in research for about a little over 30 years now. I came to Cincinnati Children and worked in the General Clinical Research Center. And then when the VTEU was awarded to Cincinnati Children's in 1996, I had just graduated as a nurse practitioner and moved over to that program. And I've been working in infectious disease with the VTEU since that time, which is a long time. As a nurse practitioner, I have a sort of dual role in my daily tasks where I work as a sub-investigator on all the projects. So I'm involved in seeing participants in the clinic, adverse events, general assessments, all of those sorts of things, history and physical. And then I also provide oversight for the operations of the program. So day-to-day staffing, liaison with the lab and the pharmacy, quality management, working with the data team to make sure all of that is going as it should, and including my least favorite, which would be budgets and contracts. So that's kind of an oversight of my role. I also work closely with all the PIs and the other sub-Is to just ensure that they have all their needs met, that they're getting the different pieces of the research that they need in order to be successful. And I feel that's one of the important roles that I have. And as a director or manager, is to just really try to keep all of those things held together. So if each one of you want to take a moment to tell us about your role, your main task, your daily task, that would be great. Kirsten, you want to just stay in the same rotation, Kirsten?
Yeah, that sounds good. I feel like my job's similar to yours. I wear many hats. So like I said, I started this job with this clinic in 2003 as an IRB coordinator, and then went and got my MPH and became a research manager. So did a lot of protocol development and helped trainees kind of start studies. And then in 2018, that's when I took over the job I'm at now. And really the four big categories that I work on, it can be pretty easy to find, is budget and fiscal management. So I create the budgets, but then I also do all the projections and track all the spending. I do all the regulatory compliance and have oversight of that. So we have a new person who helps us with all the regulatory submissions, but then overarching, I'm in charge of that. So that includes like training and quality assurance and IRB and all of those things. And then I also do a lot of the study management, which is just sort of like running the meetings and overseeing the team, the logistics of startup, how we interact with the labs, just making sure the study can run and that we have all the staffing and the things we need to actually do a study. And then the last hat I wear is HR. So I also just manage all the clinic staff. So I have a hat in every corner, I feel like. So yeah.
And Amy?
I love how you say that. They wear a lot of hats, because that means you're part of a great team. I as well, but mostly focus on regulatory. We are trying to grow that department. It's been a little challenging with COVID, but I'm responsible for the oversight, the submissions, supporting the PIs, the sub-Is, the nurses, the clinical research coordinators, the lab techs, just the general research staff, both at Emory ZCC, and we join studies oftentimes with Hope Clinic, and we'll appoint a lead regulatory person for that. Just in making sure that the research with, all human population is done in compliance. And we're following up with all of our submissions, amendments, and trainings, anything that has to do with anything on a compliance level, I try to oversee that. We have been a small team of myself and one other person under the regulatory umbrella. And we were looking to grow this when COVID hit our plates. So we are, we proudly brought an intern in and rose her up along the ladder, and lost her after 3 years to a bigger division within Emory, but we were really supportive of her. So we now have another individual that we've brought in. She's just graduated from college, and she's eager to learn. And so I'm working with her a lot, and we have a lot of other great people that are helping out with all of this. But in a nutshell, it's mostly all regulatory and quality assurance and compliance for me.
And Theda?
Yes, so, basically in charge of making sure the lab runs adequately based on our schedule for the day. I make sure we're adequately staffed. I'm available for any questions that the lab may have based on the needs of our lab. And the number of staff available. Sometimes I may have to go in and help process and ship samples. So I'm pretty much all over the place. I wear many hats here too. So I think that's a common part of all of our jobs. And one of my main duties usually is I'm answering a lot of queries that we get, for our different trials.
And that's a lot right now. Okay, thank you. For our audience, if anyone has questions, feel free to jump in and ask questions. Next, they asked us to talk about what we enjoy most about our role in the VTEU. And so, Amy, let's start with you.
Well, it would go without saying that, I've had the lucky experience of working with different entities from, sponsor corporations to, consulting firms. And I've worked on studies, in Europe and in the US. And the thing I enjoy the most about this team is their passion and dedication to the research that they're doing. They are, a group of people that have a lot of integrity. As the pressure has risen through COVID, they've never veered from the path of making sure that the research is done right, that the participants are always the #1 priority. And from a person who's overseeing the regulatory information and the safety data and handling the audits, and having now been under 2 audits in the last year from the FDA, it brings a lot of comfort and joy to know that you work with a team like that they're not going to compromise in any way. They're all very, adequately educated and trained on all of the regulations. And so that's what I enjoy the most. And it's been an exciting, I know, a devastating in some ways, but a very exciting time just in terms of research. And, being able to feel like you're making an impact has been great.
Kirsten?
Well, Amy, I might have to pick your brain about the FDA audits. I fear that we have one looming over us. And we have not had one since I've been here. So if I need to talk to someone, I might have to come talk to you if that happens. But 2 is scary. Yeah, so what do I enjoy most? So I think what I've really enjoyed since so we're a new VTEU. We just got our VTEU award right when COVID hit. So January of whenever the year was, that 2020, but it's all over since COVID. So we were awarded our VTEU, and then like COVID exploded. So we've been really busy, but the thing I've really enjoyed most about it is the complexity and like the problem solving that we've had to do. So with these COVID trials that we've had, they're all like extremely fast. They're all high enrolling. So it's been this sort of complex puzzle of like building these teams and figuring out how we're going to, we say we're going to enroll 500 people. How are we going to make that happen? And building this like huge team and figuring out all the complexities of, staffing and space and logistics and labs. So for me, that's been the most exciting part, is how dynamic it is and how the team has really come together and found their specific roles to make it all happen. So that's been probably the most fun and the most interesting. Yeah.
Thank you. And Theda?
What I love most are the types of studies we've had. I mean, like I said, I've been here a long time, so I've gone through smallpox trial, Ebola, malaria, and a slew of flu trials. So I really just enjoy the variety of trials that we have through the VTEU, and working with the team, especially the new technicians or the ones that come from the basic science side who have no idea about the clinical trials and the amount of paperwork involved and attention to detail that's needed. So I really enjoy teaching them the ropes, as you'll have it, of going through these types of trials. So I've just was really impressed with the types of trials that we've gone through with our VTEU.
Thank you. And I would say in a similar vein for myself, I think the world that we live in and work in is incredibly diverse and ever-changing and very challenging, and you're constantly having to read and learn. So for me, it's never ever boring, which is why I've been able to do it for such a long period of time. On the flip side of my role as a practitioner, it's been really fun year meeting so many people across the age span from 6 months to I think 86 is our oldest participant right now. And just, you know, being very involved in what's going on in the world out there from the participant view has been exciting as well for me. Okay, let's see. What are a few of the opportunities, I like how they phrase that, in a positive manner, or challenges in your role? So Theda, let's start with you on that one.
So on the lab side of this, you know, sometimes the main challenge I think is, you know, you read the manual of procedures or the SOP, and you know, you try to visualize everything that you'll have to do in the lab, and then it's when you're literally in there working on the sample or the processing, and you're like, wait, I don't think this is right. Wait, I need further explanation. So that always happens with every new type of study that we have that requires a certain type of processing. Like I said, you can sit, you know, in your office and try to visualize everything, but it's like a guarantee. Once you're in there, there are like a million questions. So, I mean, I don't know if that will change or how you know, you can change that really, because it's really when you're doing something that more questions come up, and you know, you're trying to figure out what you want to do or how you should proceed with this step, or you need to call someone and email. But that's usually, you know, the challenge we have in the lab in the beginning. But once, you know, we get all those questions answered, everything is smooth sailing from there. But that's usually the main issue or challenge with the lab.
Thank you. And Kirsten.
Yeah, so for challenges, I think for us, the challenge that we've sort of faced is just this growing VTEU structure that we've built. So we pre-VTEU, we were a team of like, I think it was 6 people that, you know, just kind of our core team. And we grew to now a team of full-time, about 13 people full-time. So I think for us, the challenge has been sort of figuring out workflow and figuring out how to work to people's strengths. You know, when you have that many people, that's just a lot of different skill sets that you're working with. So working to people's strengths, figuring out sort of the org structure as we've grown. And then when we did our big Novavax vaccine trial, we had like a huge surge. We had to do surge staffing. So at some point, I think we had like 50 people on our roster. So that was just a really complex challenge. And now kind of coming back down to kind of the core team and figuring out how it all works. And then in terms of opportunities, I think I've been lucky enough to been given a chance to be on more of the leadership side with this role. And so sitting in on those leadership meetings has been really fascinating. Obviously meeting all the other investigators from all the other sites has been really rewarding. And then also just being someone who's more on the operations side at those leadership meetings, I have a chance to kind of have a voice for the clinicians and coordinators who we're working with to be able to make sure that, like, even though leadership might have these ideas, there's these other, you know, the people actually doing the work have, you know, things that we need to think through. And so being a voice and an advocate for them at those leadership meetings.
Thank you. And Amy?
You know, for our group, I think the largest challenge has been finding effective communication to bridge the gap between the different entities and doing that effectively. Growing from using Emory IRB to really predominantly using central IRBs, and then also having different groups in the middle between the sponsors. You know, we have many more CROs that are consistently involved, and then another company that is responsible for the monitoring and the auditing. So keeping all of that straight amongst many different variables who have that system in place, and then adding remote communications to that has been a challenge. I think it's also been a great opportunity to learn where we need to put different process in place. I know we're spending quite a bit of effort now researching, e-compliance systems. We're pretty paper driven still, really not feeling confident that many of the systems out on the market to purchase were HIPAA compliant. And, adjusting to the changes that we as a group fell under the new rules, and the HIPAA law, when it changed, it only applies to those groups that are, of an entity that has a billable or treatment involved. So for us as a group, that's next to none. So when you look at these master templates that come out for consent forms, and you look at implementing these things also at the pace that they're wanting things to be conducted, it's difficult to get the language in place and master trial agreements in place. And I think we have, 15, 16 months under our belt now doing these rapid release trials that, we have Advara under our belt pretty well now. We've got agreements in place, and it's moving pretty smoothly. But I'd say that was probably the biggest opportunity to see where change needed to happen, and where we can continue to grow.
Oops, sorry. One of the opportunities for me personally has been to be involved really in the cutting edge science, from protocol development, helping to create the forms, and moving things forward to a community COVID event that we were able to participate in a week ago, and how being in this for 30 years, to be able to see something go that full cycle has been a very exciting opportunity. On the flip side of that, the challenge for the year has really been staffing, keeping the staff from completely burning out, from taking very lucrative work from home and your PJ industry jobs, bringing on and onboarding new staff, and really just the training and mentoring of all that new staff while you have such a rapid flow of work has certainly been a challenge. We were lucky to have our PICU be able to provide staffing for us for almost a year now. And through that process, I feel like we will develop some sort of training and mentoring programs so that nurses are introduced to research. Were you to ever have this situation again, that there's some kind of cross training that goes on as part of the process in the institution. And so that's something that I'm very interested in if and when the world slows down, which I'm hopeful for. So how about tips on collaborating? Kirsten, would you like to talk about that?
Sure. I thought about this a little bit. I think the tips that seemed to work, the things that worked best for us was really, communicating clearly what people's roles and responsibilities were. So, the example being that we just did this huge Novavax trial, and we ended up enrolling just at our site alone, I think like almost 400 people. And I think the trick was really just like clearly defining what everyone was doing, both just overall, and then even on a day-to-day basis, with just this large flow of people coming through. Like every day, everyone had an assigned role that they had to do. So just clearly communicating what people were doing, what their expectations are for their job, I think is really important. If you don't set those expectations, then I think people can kind of fall back a little bit. And then we've really started relying on teams. So I think just like the workhorse of our clinic has become teams, and we just have a giant chat that just goes all day. So people can always be asking questions. So that way you don't run the risk. We do have a lot of new staff that we brought in who are pretty young, just recent graduates who don't have a ton of experience. So having that chat to be able to just like throw a question out and have somebody else help answer it, I think was a big part of how we were able to do it with such a junior team. So yeah.
For us, I guess the question is tips for collaborating. I would agree, communication is the cornerstone of that. So setting up, regularly scheduled meetings, having a variety of different platforms in which you can communicate. I myself have found that email is almost becoming something that's just really difficult for me. They come in at such a rapid pace. So, allowing other avenues for communication and having that accessibility for people. Again, assigning roles to people and really trying to hone in on that, but allowing everybody to adapt and be flexible. One of the things that I really love about working for an academic institute is the cornerstone behind that is education and teaching. So allowing that to kind of fill through yourself and realize that, especially in light of what we've just gone through, that there is room for growth, that things are somewhat malleable and flexible right now, and that anybody at any level within the team has the ability to produce ideas. And if they've got the energy for it and the time, they can explore it and bring it to the group and have methods of implementing it. So I think that's exciting. But I think in terms of the trick for collaboration, it's to maintain that idea that we can all adapt and if something's not working, quickly recognize it and try something else. Mostly for communication.
Thank you. And Theda?
Yeah, so I think this is, common to make sure everyone know the expectations. Expectations are clear, know your role. Communication, I mean, you can't really be effective without proper communication within the team. So I think everyone would agree with that. Secondly, I would say like developing trust and respect with your team. That really goes a long way when you show your team respect and that you can trust them to, complete their tasks, whatever they may be, and also make it easy for people to ask for help. So I'll ask questions, because when people are, shy or afraid to ask, or they may think that it's a dumb question, then that leads to problems. Like when it comes to the lab, if a technician doesn't really understand the protocol, the SOP, or what they're supposed to do, but they're afraid to ask me for help, and then they end up doing something inaccurately, and then that leads to a protocol deviation. So it's better to just ask the question. No question is stupid. We'll work through it, talk through it, but it just works better when people feel comfortable being able to ask questions and seek help.
Thank you. I agree with all of that. In addition, one thing we've tried to do is to have everyone cross-train for each other's role. And not that you would ever have to do it, but I think it builds an understanding of what that other person does and what they're responsible for. And of course, if all it goes to pot one day, someone could jump in and do someone else's job. But I think it does feed into what Theda was saying of building that trust and respect for each and everyone's role, so that you can work together and collaborate as a team. And of course, communication is definitely key. I have a follow-up question. When should an investigator reach out to you during their development of a study? That's a good question. Would anyone like to take that?
For myself, I would say, as soon as you have, some working documents, it's good to start working with your regulatory team, because at that point they can let you know what you need to form your submission and probably start helping you with that submission, as well as starting to identify the staff and the training and anticipations of, what you could really look at in terms of a start date, and what's feasible. So I'd say as soon as you have, working documents, we have most of our investigators begin to discuss things with our team as soon as they know something's coming down the pipeline or something's coming up. So everyone can start looking at it. Our recruiters begin to develop recruitment materials. I've taken a pretty pivotal role in developing the consent forms. And so you can get a team that helps you.
Thank you. Kirsten or Theda, do you have anything to add?
Not really in the lab side.
Yeah, I think it's just the same. Is the minute that the protocol is sort of drafted, I think it just needs to go to the team that's actually going to help push it out, because there's all the regulatory pieces, there's all the documents, there's just the logistics of how it actually will run in the clinic and what kind of supplies you need and like the budget. So the minute it's there, it just needs to go to the team that's going to start working on the logistics. The lab, how the labs are going to flow, because it takes time, especially now, to get things ordered. Supply chain's a huge problem. So the sooner the better, really. And then a lot of times, if it's an investigator initiated study, maybe there's little things that need to be changed, because sometimes the clinicians who are actually doing the work have a lot of thoughts or ideas on like how it will flow, or things that maybe got missed in terms of safety labs that need to get drawn. And so just more hands on to look at it early so that you can make those updates before you submit it to the IRB and then have to have a protocol amendment later. So, yeah.
I agree. Thank you. So thinking about the times pre-COVID, which is pretty hard to do right now, but going back to those days, Theda, tell us about your most memorable VTEU study.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, when we first started, it was pretty simple, laboratory processes, just processing for serum. So my most memorable study is our smallpox study many years ago. I forgot when it started, but this was our study that introduced PBMC processing. And it was a big deal because, we hadn't done it in a while. So, we were trying to get ready for that. So that study was more like the gateway study for us into more enhanced laboratory processes for our lab, and to take on more studies that really had lab intensive processes. So that was my most memorable study because it was a big deal for us. We had a lot of participants to enroll. We had a lot of PBMCs to process, and it was really exciting time for us.
Sorry, Kirsten, what about you?
Oh, yeah, so we don't have any pre-COVID VTEU experiences. We do have like pre-VTEU, but we were mostly just an infectious disease research clinic, mostly STIs. But I would say the most memorable thing in the VTEU in the year and a half we've done it is that we partnered with the Lummi Nation up in Bellingham to do the Novavax study up there with their community. So I really think that was really a pretty incredible collaboration that we set up with them, and was an extremely memorable and really unique experience. So it's been really a really neat opportunity. So.
And Amy?
My experience with the VTEU studies is, most of them were ongoing, and then COVID hit. So I'm gonna, one of the ones that was ongoing when I came on board that just appealed to me just because of being a mom And having dealt with mosquito bites the entire time of my children's life was the chikungunya study. I liked the idea that it was a phase 1 study. There would be a lot to grow with it, but also that, you know, already we knew that once a person had been exposed to the illness, that you pretty much saw 100% effectiveness. So you knew you were going to come out with something pretty great there. In the end. But, you know, I enjoy watching the flu studies progress. I enjoy watching that, you know, not at our site as much, but at Hope Clinic, you know, they've explored different avenues for delivery methods. And I think that's exciting. And again, it was just seemed very applicable, having just come into infectious disease and seeing that these things just really apply to real life. And I have a huge appreciation for the way the VTEU studies and DMID conducts their studies. It just really tickles my funny bone. It's very regimented, and I know what to expect when I see it. So then when, you know, 1811 came out and I got to see things from start to finish, you know, it really, these are great studies to conduct. There's a lot of thought that goes into them. There's a method to the design of the study. I've been a part of other studies that could have been a great product, but they didn't design the study well. So that's about all I can say.
Thank you. I think for our site, the most memorable studies we do are probably our inpatient trials. We do quite a lot of enteric studies, inpatient studies, where folks come in for 8 to 10 days and have vomiting and diarrhea. So those are always exciting and fun. I like to say it's like going on a cruise. You come up the gangplank, the doors go up. We feed you, we entertain you, we make sure you have fun, but you can't leave until the cruise is over. So those are always interesting for 20 strangers to meet and make friends and get along for 10 days, and also to be able to collect all your study endpoints on time. So I think those are always pretty memorable. Let's talk a little bit about how COVID has affected our role. And I think we've all mentioned that a little bit. And then I see we have a question in the chat, which we can go to. I think for me, COVID has forced me to think outside the box in a way that I've never been challenged to do before, from everything, as you mentioned before, from space to staffing, to having enough PIs and sub-Is to cover the thousands of people coming through the clinic, and you know, training and quality, and do you have enough pharmacists to give that many vaccines a day, and you know, can the lab staff manage all the PBMCs? So it really has just been really challenging and exciting, a little overwhelming at times. You know, we put out just an internal email before the trial started, just trying to see if people would be interested in trials, and within 2 days had almost 5,000 people on an interest list. So even dealing with little things like that have certainly been interesting, and have caused me to develop more skills than I had when I started last year. Theda, why don't you go?
Okay, so basically for us, when COVID happened, a lot of the labs were ramping down. Like maybe the day before we found out we were going to be involved with the Moderna trial, you know, we got emails from EHSO telling us what we need to do to ramp down our labs, but we were ramping up. So basically, we got so busy, and with everything happening in the world at that time, trying to socially distance in the lab was quite a feat. I mean, we were literally so busy that it was virtually impossible. So I just had to make sure, everyone wore their mask. I mean, I will be honest, it was very difficult to socially distance in the lab. But we did our best. We at least at our computers, we did socially distance, but, just in the actual processing areas, it was very difficult for us to socially distance. But just for me, my role, just making sure everyone, wore protection, wore the proper PPE. We did have to, change the type of PPE that we wore in the lab. So it was very different for us. Like I said, everyone else ramped down and we ramped up, and we've been that way since the beginning of COVID. We actually got busy. We were busier, than before COVID because of all these trials and the intricacies of how we needed to maneuver around each other in the lab. So my role was just to make sure that, everything ran smoothly and we were properly, had the proper PPE. And then of course there was a problem getting PPE. So it was quite interesting, COVID.
Thank you. Kirsten, what about your site?
Yeah, so I think COVID, how it affected my role or this clinic is really just kind of what you talked about, which is the pace and the scale of everything. It just, what we used to be, used to sort of smaller studies where you kind of had one at a time that started one at a time. So, and now it's like we're getting thrown these studies that are all competing and needing to start urgently and within weeks from each other. So just the pace and the scale of everything just sort of exploded is the term I would use, including the workload for everyone. So it's been a challenge, I think, for all of us to kind of figure out how to manage that workload and how to make sure people aren't burned out. And just when you think you get a breath, another study comes. And so everyone's just sort of like, it's just, that's been the biggest change. And the work-life balance, in all honesty, I think has been hard for everyone in this clinic, especially with, I said Teams was a great communicator, but it also can be a problem because people have it on their phones. And so it's just become this sort of constant work, which isn't the culture that we were before. So I think it's just like thinking through how to be more careful with that going forward if things do start to slow down. So it's been a big change for sure for, I know everyone in this meeting. So that's been the biggest for me.
And that's a very good point. I'm sure that we are all now struggling with the work-life balance. Amy, would you like to comment, and then we'll move to the questions in the chat?
I'm sure, and I would mirror many of those sentiments. I think it's the work-life balance. For me, the big transition of being remote, pretty much full-time, and the people doing our job remote, keeping them inspired and seeing there's a light at the end of the tunnel, because everybody had to go on to a very systematic approach with 1 to 2 of us trying to accomplish closing down some trials, slowing down the pace of those trials, and managing every aspect of regulatory and learning to handle the audits that still needed to come in. It has been extremely challenging. So remaining optimistic, remaining that we're all part of a team. Everybody's trying to accomplish this goal and accomplish it at the best, in the best way they can. Dr. Anderson, one of the lead PIs at our center, we have a weekly meeting, and a part of that optimism was that he presented something from some literature that he published about protecting the community through child vaccination. And, just for example, he rattled off, today it feels like we're just plugging away at city trainings and EMID trainings. We're making sure everything is filed and everything's in the IRB, and we're filing a submission, and they're asking for more information. And by the way, could you do it faster? At the end of all of it, we had, diphtheria back in 1938 to 1945, and there were 21,053 cases during that time, and we vaccinated about 85% of the population. And what did we have? We had a 100% reduction rate. He went down and dispelled what happened with measles and mumps and polio and rubella. And overall, the reduction rate after vaccination was something over 95% in all of those areas, and that we would get there and get to be a part of it. So to allow that mundane task-oriented work on a daily basis to look at the bigger picture, I think, that'll be something I take with me beyond COVID now, because some of the aspects of regulatory are, as we all know, because everybody kind of runs into their office when they see us coming. Being remote is even more fun because you have to multiply text, go on the group chat. I'm looking for you. So, I think keeping that open-mindedness and the vision at the very end, what you're trying to accomplish.
Thank you. So here's the question in the chat. Can you comment on the role staff play in the career development for junior faculty at your site? And if you don't mind, I'll start off on this one. We have developed a little orientation to vaccine research that we like to have our fellows and junior faculty move through. And a lot of it's self-study or meeting with key people in the various roles so that they
I believe Michelle froze.
nurse coordinators in general really enjoy the junior faculty and doing that mentorship and sort of taking on that role of shepherding them through and showing them the ropes. So I think this is a positive relationship for our group, and we all actually really enjoy that very much. Would anyone else like to chime in for what goes on at your site and how your staff play, what role they play in the career development of junior faculty?
I could talk a little bit. Michelle, you froze when you were talking, so we missed like most of what you said. So.
Oh, okay.
I know.
Well, it was great. Sorry.
It was the best of the whole thing. No. It's probably what Michelle was saying is what we do at our clinic too. So, our junior faculty, obviously we have a mentor who's, helps kind of come up with their project. And then with our research clinic, with our fellows or graduate students or junior investigators, we have usually a team of an experienced coordinator who they'll pair with to kind of work on developing the study tools, and then they'll meet with me to talk about regulatory, and then we'll have them meet with a clinician to kind of work through the pieces of their protocol. And then from there, it's really just kind of guiding them through the process of, how it goes through the IRB. Generally, they'll do the IRB submission with like help from me, or they'll write the protocol or develop the forms, but with help from all those kind of key people along the way, so that they're sort of doing it and learning all the parts of it, not just like being a PI, but they're learning what it's like to actually do the visit and be the clinician, or how to write the consent and how to do what the coordinator's doing, so that they get kind of the full picture of the whole experience. That's what we've done here.
Thank you. You're right. Very similar. Here's a very good question. What are things that investigators can do to work most effectively with you? What do you wish the investigators knew? Anybody like to check that one on?
Now's your chance to really let us know the things that we should know so that we don't get on your nerves.
Well, I'll try not to freeze this time, but I would say just being very engaged from the very beginning, coming to us, even maybe when you have an idea and not even a draft, and letting us help you shape that and mold it. Asking all the questions that you think might be dumb. There's, as you said before, Theda, there's no dumb questions. What do I wish the investigators knew? Boy, I'm not sure how to answer that one. Anyone got an idea for that one?
I would say to mirror your sentiment, come and ask the questions when the thoughts are being produced into research, because oftentimes if I'm being given a protocol that is, say it's an investigator driven study, and there wasn't the idea that this has to be formulated into a different template. I mean, it just saves a lot of work and asks a lot of questions and get familiar with the different departments. So, that you have, the data management side of things, you have the QA side of things, you have the clinical resources and the regulatory teams, because everyone comes to that table with different input as to how you get studies off the ground. So I think the earlier that you come with that, the better, the better you'll, I don't know, the experience will be better for everybody.
Yeah, and that's true. We have a team of people to help you. I guess I have a question for you on the flip side of that. What are the things that we could do to make this a better mentoring training process for your junior faculty? And Kayla says that you can unmute if you would like to ask your own question.
Absolutely. Now is your chance to ask these experts, and we appreciate their time and everything that they've done to, give us some insight into the, role that they have so that they can help us become a better team. So if you have a question, please feel free to ask it. There's no question too small or too big.
I'll add a comment to the question that was asked about what investigators, should know to be effective. So letting the lab know maybe what the expectations are as far as do you need outside of work hours, technicians, the weekend, because there are some studies that do require maybe processing outside of your, the normal work hours. So if that's communicated in advance, that'll be very helpful, especially, weekend coverage. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah,
and I'd also add for us, like knowing what staff you have to work with, and knowing that there's a process to adding staff to studies. And then, that way you can kind of know up front if you need other staff, and we can help you resource that, to know who would be available. We've done a really good job when we talked earlier about how to make these things successful. We've really, assigned studies to different team members and let there be a lead, because that just helps with the process. So we can be of help to you if we know that's needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we do a similar here where we assign sort of a lead coordinator and a lead clinician. And if it's someone who's junior, they'll work with those people. I think the big thing is just all the pieces, you have the protocol, but then what we've all talked about is there's like data management, there's lab, there's like budget and fiscal and payments and like all these different things. It's not just like, one protocol that might be, 20 pages long, might have all these different branches that come off of it, just in terms of like the flow of the work. So, having them engaged early, what we've mentioned, and having them be in on those startup meetings with the coordinators and the clinicians and the people who have the experience, so that they can kind of realize like what all is involved to do this, because there's generally just a lot more than it seems when you have a protocol, just fiscally, regulatory, lab, all that. It's just, there's just a lot of moving parts. So the earlier and the sooner they can get engaged to understand all those different pieces, I think is important.
And I think the upside and the downside of COVID is it has created a lot of new pathways for communication. So there's really no excuse now to wait until somebody comes to that campus or goes to this campus. to have a meeting. We can always meet anytime, anywhere, even though we need to set some limits on that now. But I do think that will help mentorship going forward. I think that'll make things easier, and so that's a positive.
Does anybody have any last requests or questions that they want to put out? Otherwise, I think we'll thank our panelists and have everybody have a great rest of the day. Anybody else?
No, I just wanted to say what a wealth of knowledge that these women have. And I think that, just like when you're a pediatrician and you start in the nursery, you make sure that you listen to the nurses and the people that are in charge, and they'll keep you from going astray. So these people are wonderful, and they're there to train you, and some of my deepest and dearest colleagues and have been these people, and so know them and love them and respect them, and thank you so much for your words of wisdom.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Kathy.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Kathy, just to join her to thank you for coming to share your experience with us. I learned a lot from just listening to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Thank you for
Bye.
having us.
Bye-bye.